There are moments you can't explain. You walk into a room you've never seen, and somehow it aches with familiarity. Or you hear a voice inside your mind, not yours exactly, but someone older, someone who sounds like they've known you longer than you've been alive. And then it comes. That soft, terrifying thought. What if I'm not who I think I am? Not broken, not lost, just misremembered. That's where we begin tonight. Not in facts or answers, but in the space between who you are and who you used to be before anyone gave you a name. So breathe slowly now. You don't need to hold yourself so tightly. Let the body loosen your shoulders, your chest, even the thoughts clinging to your last I. There's no need to figure it out. Just let the mirror fog. Let the edges blur. And if some part of this feels familiar, a line you've heard in a dream, a feeling from another version of you, then welcome home. If you'd like to stay longer, you're welcome to subscribe or simply leave behind a quiet comment, like a fingerprint on a fading thought. Tonight, we'll drift into the soft folds of memory and identity, not to find the truth, but to remember something you were never meant to forget. Section 1. You are not a thing, but a process. Your identity is not fixed. It's a river that never flows the same way twice. You begin with a breath. Not just now, but always. Every version of you that's ever existed, they all began with this soft, invisible inhale. And yet, none of those versions remain. They've dissolved behind you, like footprints in mist. So who are you? Really? The one breathing now? Or the memory of the one who breathed before? Modern neuroscience offers a strange kind of mirror. It doesn't show you a soul or a self. It shows a process, an endlessly shifting loop of prediction, sensation, and interpretation. Your brain is not a camera. It doesn't passively observe the world. It guesses the world, and then filters your perception through what it already expects to find. This is the core of what cognitive scientist Anil Seth calls the controlled hallucination of consciousness. Your sense of self, your feeling of I am, this isn't a thing inside your head. It's a story your brain keeps rewriting in real time to keep you alive, grounded, and functional. That voice in your head, it's not the real you. It's the narrator of your survival. A loop of meaning-making so consistent and so convincing that you mistake it for truth. Philosopher Thomas Metzinger goes even further. In the ego tunnel, he writes, no such thing as a self exists in the world. The self is the content of a model created by your brain. What he means is that the self you feel is a hallucination, a useful, beautiful, persistent one, but still just a process. A tunnel of light your brain builds to keep your consciousness from shattering. And that might sound unsettling, but in truth, it's liberating. Because if you're not a fixed thing, then nothing about you is permanently broken. You're not stuck. You're becoming. Like a river, you are shaped by every rock you pass, every bend you flow around, every reflection you carry for a moment and then release. You change when you speak to someone. You change when you dream. You even change when you remember something, because memory isn't a playback device. It's an act of reconstruction. Each time you recall a moment, your brain rewrites it a little blurrier, a little softer, like a watercolor left in the rain. This means your identity is not stored anywhere. Not in your cells, not in your face, not even in your mind. It emerges, like a flicker of light between what the world gives you and what your body can hold. This is the idea behind the narrative self, coined by philosopher Daniel Dennett, the theory that you are not a core essence, but a center of gravity created by all the stories you've ever told yourself, and all the stories others have told about you. But here's the whisper beneath all that science. What if you've always known this? What if that feeling of not belonging, of being different each year, of looking back on your childhood and wondering, was that really me, isn't confusion at all, but recognition, a soft remembering that you are not a solid shape but a shimmering rhythm, a body of music played differently each day by hands that are sometimes yours, sometimes not. You don't need to chase who you are. You don't need to define it. You only need to listen to how it moves, how it shifts, how it breathes. Tonight, as you listen, you may feel the walls of that story loosen, not collapse. Just soften like fog rising off a river that's always flowing. Even when you sleep, you are not a thing. You are not a label. You are not a file waiting to be opened. You are a becoming with no endpoint and no single name. And maybe, just maybe, you were never meant to be anything but this. Just this breath and the one after. Section 2. The mirror test and the birth of the self. How self-recognition in mirrors shaped our idea of identity. There's something strange about a mirror. Not the surface, not the reflection, but the way it stares back. Silent, cold, exact, and yet somehow uncertain. You lean in, and your face follows. But so do your doubts. Because sometimes, it doesn't feel like you're looking at yourself. It feels like you're being watched by someone who looks exactly like you, but doesn't quite believe in your name. This is the story of the first time we ever noticed ourselves noticing. It sounds simple, but for most of human history, we didn't know if animals or even infants were aware of themselves at all. Did they feel like someone, or were they just reacting to the world, like waves responding to wind? Then came the mirror. In 1970, psychologist Gordon Gallup Jr. conducted a study that would change everything we thought we knew about consciousness. He placed mirrors in the cages of chimpanzees, and at first, they reacted as if to a stranger. They growled, postured, stared. But after a few days, something incredible happened. They began to use the mirrors to explore their own bodies. They looked at parts they couldn't normally see, like their teeth, eyes, and backs. Then came the true test. Gallup placed a red dot on the foreheads of the chimps while they were asleep. When they awoke and looked into the mirror, they reached up not to the mirror, but to their own foreheads. This moment, simple, quiet, undeniable, was the beginning of self-recognition. The moment we could say, this creature knows that it is itself. Since then, this mirror test has been applied to animals across the world, and the results, surprising, humbling, and still deeply mysterious. Among the creatures who passed chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, dolphins, elephants, magpies, manta rays, and possibly even ants under certain conditions. Among those who failed, dogs, cats, octopuses, and most humans under the age of 18 months. But here's the paradox. Failing the mirror test doesn't mean you have no self. It only means you don't recognize that self in that kind of reflection. Because identity, as we now understand it, is not just seeing yourself, it's interpreting what you see. Psychologists now believe that self-awareness is a spectrum. There's the bodily self knowing you occupy space. There's the interpersonal self knowing others see you. There's the narrative self knowing you have a past and future. And then there's the meta self, the awareness of your own awareness. The mirror only scratches the surface, and yet, it still carries a strange kind of power. Think about the first time you stared at your reflection too long. Do you remember the quiet unease, that flicker of something ancient? Something watching from behind your own eyes? That might be the oldest moment of selfhood. Not the first heartbeat, not the first word, but the first whisper inside you that said, "That's me." And still, what if it isn't? What if mirrors only show the version of you you've rehearsed? The expression you've learned to perform? The angle you believe makes you lovable? In that case, the mirror doesn't reveal identity. It reveals identity maintenance, a performance, a mask, a curated illusion. Evolutionary biology suggests that self-recognition may have developed not for personal enlightenment, but for social survival. Those who could track their image could track how others might see them, and therefore control their behavior accordingly. In that sense, selfhood didn't begin in solitude. It began in community, in competition, in the need to be seen in a way that ensured survival, affection, safety. So when you look into a mirror now, what are you really looking for? Validation, familiarity, proof that you still exist. Or maybe you're hoping to catch a glimpse of the you haven't met yet. The one hiding just behind the surface. The one you only meet in dreams. There's a haunting line in neuroscience. The self is what the brain predicts it will be, which means that even your reflection is not a record of who you are, but a guess built from memory, fear, hope, and imagination. The mirror test is not really about animals. It's about us. Because we keep looking for ourselves in glass, in other people's eyes, in digital images, in memories of childhood, hoping one day the reflection will feel real again. But maybe it never was. Maybe the mirror never showed you anything except your latest attempt at staying intact. And maybe tonight, you can stop performing, stop rehearsing, just be the part of you that sees, feels, forgets, and still remains. The one that recognizes nothing, but somehow feels everything. Section 3. The story. You tell yourself every morning, you are not your brain. You are the story your brain tells. Every morning, before your body fully remembers how to move, before the light fully enters your eyes, there's a flicker. It's not a thought. It's not a feeling. It's a return to the person you've been trained to believe you are, to the name, the history, the edges, to the weight of memory settling into the shape of you. But what if that isn't who you are? What if that you is simply the story your brain tells? A kind of quiet fiction meant not to reveal the truth, but to keep you coherent. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio has spent decades studying this flicker, the moment where the body becomes the mind. In his book, Self Comes to Mind, he proposes something quietly revolutionary. The self is not a thing inside you. It is a process created by the brain integrating signals from the body with a narrative about the world. In other words, you don't have a self. You generate one. And you do it every day, like breath, like heartbeat, like dreaming. At Harvard's Mind-Brain Behavior Initiative, researchers have begun mapping the neural foundations of what's called the narrative self. The idea that we are not defined by what we experience, but by how we stitch those moments together into something we can live inside. Memory alone isn't enough. You need meaning. You need cause, effect, continuity. even if it's all a guess, even if it's wrong. Because without a story, the mind begins to fragment. Experiences lose their context. You become a passenger with no map and no name. This is why trauma feels so disorienting. It breaks the narrative. It inserts a moment that doesn't fit, a chapter that can't be explained. And so the mind edits. It denies. It rewrites. It forgets. Not because it's flawed, but because it's doing its job to protect the story. But here's the thing, the story was never true. It was never meant to be. The you wake up as each day is a living draft. A first-person narrator who rearranges your past to fit your present, who imagines your future based on what the body can survive. Damasio calls this the autobiographical self, a construct born from the body's signals, the brain's interpretations, and the culture's expectations. It is a collaboration between flesh, neuron, memory, and myth. And still, it feels real. That's the magic. That's the illusion. That's the survival instinct made poetic. You are the book your brain is writing so it doesn't forget why it matters. But sometimes you do forget. Sometimes you wake up and the story feels too heavy, too old, too far from the truth. And that's okay. Because unlike a book, your story can change. You are both author and reader, editor and character, dreamer and dreamed. There is a part of you that knows how to rewrite. A part that whispers, you don't have to be the same today. And maybe that's what healing is. Not becoming someone new, but slowly editing the story until it feels like home again. Even if the facts remain the same, the meaning can shift. The tone can soften. The light can change. That's not delusion. That's being alive. And it's beautiful. Because it means you are not a fixed identity trapped in neurons. You are a rhythm, a resonance, a sentence mid-breath waiting to find its next word. So tomorrow morning, when your eyes first open, don't rush into the story. Let it arrive slowly. Ask softly, who am I today? If I don't rush to remember, you may find the answer isn't in your thoughts, or your memories, or your name. It's in the way the sunlight touches your face. It's in the weight of your breath against the pillow. It's in the quiet decision to simply exist before you define. Because before your brain tells the story, you were already here. You were already enough. Section 4. Your memories are rewritten. Every time you recall them. Recalling isn't retrieving. It's reimagining, like a painter repainting a scene. There's a memory you hold. Not just a memory, but the memory. The one that shaped you. The one you return to in quiet hours. When the world is dark and your breath feels older than your body, you believe it lives somewhere deep, untouched, intact, waiting. But here's the secret, it doesn't exist. Not like you think. Not like you hope. Every time you recall that moment, you change it. Slightly. Silently. Unintentionally. It's not your fault. It's how the brain works. Cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus proved this over decades of gentle, startling research. In one experiment, she showed people footage of a car crash and asked what they saw. Those who heard the word smashed reported higher speeds and shattered glass. Those who heard bumped remembered less damage. But here's the twist. There was no glass in the footage. Just the suggestion. Just the framing was enough to change the memory. It didn't overwrite the original. It became the original. And what Loftus discovered wasn't just a quirk. It was a truth hiding in plain sight. Memory is not retrieval. It's reconstruction. Every time you remember something, Your brain rebuilds it from scratch, pulling threads from sensation, belief, imagination, fear, and when that new version is restored, it replaces the old. This process is called reconsolidation, and it's as natural as blinking, as irreversible as ink in water. At MIT's Brain and Cognitive Sciences Department, neuroscientists have traced this in real time. When a memory is recalled, the hippocampus, your brain's internal archivist, doesn't just access the file. It destabilizes it, exposes it, leaves it open to the winds of current emotion, context, and bias. In that moment of recall, you're not remembering what happened. You're remembering your last memory of remembering it. It's like repainting the same canvas again and again each time. The brush slightly heavier with mood. The colors slightly altered by what you feel now about what you felt then. And slowly, without realizing, the original fades beneath the layers. Not erased, just overwritten by something more emotionally true than factually real. Think about that childhood moment, the scent of summer grass, a parent's voice, the way the light hit your face. Now ask, is that what really happened? Or is that the scene your heart prefers to remember? It's not deception, it's not delusion, it's survival. Your brain doesn't store truth, it stores meaning, and meaning changes as you grow, as you heal, as you mourn. That's why two people can live the same moment and walk away with stories that contradict, not because one is lying, but because each carries a different version of what that moment meant to them. We are, as poet Mary Oliver once said, each a story told by shadows and light, and shadows move. But here's something softer, something sacred. This plasticity, this fragility of memory, is not a flaw. It's a gift. It means you are not chained to the past. It means you are allowed to revisit pain and come away with gentleness. You are allowed to repaint grief with a softer brush. You are allowed to remember and forgive at the same time. Because in the temple of your brain, memory is not a stone monument. It's a pool of water, rippling, reflecting, responding to your breath. You do not remember yesterday. You remember the story you told yourself about yesterday last night while trying to fall asleep. And that, perhaps, is the most human thing of all. So tonight, as old memories begin to stir, don't grip them tightly. Let them move. Let them shift. Let them dissolve into something kinder. Because who you are is not what happened. It's what you're willing to carry forward and how softly you're willing to hold it. Section 5. What if the real you never speaks? The voice in your head might just be the narrator, not the author. There is a quiet voice in your mind. It whispers when no one else is near. It comments on the weather. It replays a conversation. It critiques, worries, jokes, repeats. It's there when you're brushing your teeth, when you're trying to fall asleep, when you're alone with nothing but your breath. But what if that voice isn't really you? What if the real you, the deep self, the one who feels grief before it has words, the one who loves without narrating it aloud, never actually speaks? What if the true author of your life hides behind the curtain, while the voice you hear is simply the narrator, fumbling to keep up? This idea isn't just poetic. It's one of the most mind-bending, serious challenges to how we define the self, and it's rooted in neuroscience, psychology, and ancient echoes of consciousness itself. Let's walk slowly through the hallways of the mind past the mirrors and monologues, and begin to unlearn what we think we know about who's truly inside. Julian Jaynes and the Lost Voices of the Gods. In 1976, psychologist Julian Jaynes shook the world of consciousness theory with a strange and ancient proposition. His book, The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, argued that the voice in your head is a relatively recent phenomenon. Jaynes claimed that, in early civilizations, Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, Homeric Greece, people didn't think the way we do. Instead of having an internal I to reflect and reason, humans operated in a bicameral mindset. One part of the brain issued commands, and the other followed. When early people heard voices instructing them, punishing them, guiding them, they believed these voices were gods. The left hemisphere, typically associated with language production, would generate auditory hallucinations under stress or uncertainty. These hallucinations were interpreted as external authorities, kings, ancestors, deities. In this view, what we now experience as our inner voice may be the psychological remnant of something older, a collapsed structure, where the gods stopped speaking and we mistook their absence for the birth of autonomy. In short, the voice in your head might be what remains after something deeper went silent. The narrator and the self are not the same. Fast forward to today. You're not hearing Zeus tell you what to do, but you do hear a voice, don't you? Science now confirms that internal monologue, the stream of verbal thoughts in your mind, is common, but not universal. Some people hear a constant narration of their lives. Others think in images, sensations, or abstract ideas with no words at all. In a 2020 article from Science Daily, summarizing research from the University of Nevada, scientists revealed that the way people experience thought varies dramatically. The voice in your head might be absent entirely, and you'd still function, reflect, love, create. This distinction matters. It means that the inner voice is not the self. It is a tool, a lens, a sometimes helpful, sometimes warped mirror. You don't speak your pain before you feel it. You don't need to verbalize "I am me" to be you. The real you might live in the silence behind the voice. 3. Trauma, thought loops, and the fragility of the inner narrator. Think of a moment you were overwhelmed. Heartbreak, grief, shame. You might have felt speechless, and not just outwardly. Even your inner monologue fell quiet, or repeated the same broken sentence like a scratched record. I can't do this. Why me? I'm lost. Studies in trauma psychology, including work from the American Psychological Association (APA), show that under extreme stress, the brain's language centers can go dark. Broca's area, essential for producing language, shows reduced activity. Thought collapses into raw sensation heat, nausea, a pit in the stomach. No words. Just you. And yet, those moments when the voice disappears are some of the most real you've ever felt. So if your inner monologue goes silent when life gets the most real, how can we claim it's you? Maybe the voice is not the captain of the ship. Maybe it's just the reporter, scribbling notes from the bridge. IV, meditation, mindfulness, and meeting the non-verbal self. In meditation traditions, especially in Zen Buddhism and Vipassana practice, silence is not emptiness. It is presence. The more one sits in stillness, listening not for words, but for breath, sensation, awareness itself, the more it becomes clear that identity can survive the absence of thought. You are still there when the inner narrator sleeps. Perhaps even more so. Teachers often describe consciousness like a sky. Thoughts are clouds, temporary, moving, sometimes stormy. But you are not the clouds. You are the sky. Even if the narrator falls silent, the sky remains. So who is the real you? If the voice in your head is not the real you, then who is? That's not a riddle with an answer. It's a doorway into a mystery. Perhaps the self is not a thing you find, but a space you enter. Not a voice you hear, but a silence you feel. Some neuroscientists, like Anil Seth and Antonio Damasio, suggest that consciousness and the sense of self is a controlled hallucination, constructed from predictive models, bodily sensations, and social memory. Your brain tells a story about you because it helps to organize perception, survival, and emotion. The voice helps keep the story going. But the author, that might be something deeper, quieter, something that never needed words in the first place. Tonight, as you fall asleep, listen not for the chatter, not for the to-do list, the replayed conversations, the restless monologue. Instead, listen for what's beneath the voice, the slow hum of existence, the rhythm of breath, the warmth behind your eyes. The real you may not speak at all, but it's there, soft, sacred, untouched by words. Waiting. Section 6, Inherited Memories and Ancestral Echoes. You're lying still, but somewhere in your cells, a memory you never lived is stirring. Not a thought, not an image, but a tremble in your breath, a rhythm in your heartbeat, a silence that doesn't quite belong to your own story. What if your dreams are not entirely yours? What if, folded into the soft spirals of your DNA, there are traces of grief that pass through someone else's hands, hands that once held a bowl in famine, hands that once closed over a goodbye letter, never sent. Welcome to the strange science of epigenetic memory, where your grandmother's heartbreak can shape your hunger, your fears, even your sleep. For years, science believed that only DNA passed through generations, the base code, locked and unchanging. But now, we know that life events leave marks, not by rewriting the code, but by whispering instructions on how that code is read. They're called epigenetic tags, chemical bookmarks that say, "Pay attention here. Silence that gene. Protect. Prepare. Survive." And these whispers can linger across decades, across lifetimes. In 2005, researchers studying descendants of Dutch famine survivors noticed something strange. Those whose grandmothers had starved during pregnancy were more prone to diabetes, heart disease, and stress disorders, even if they themselves had grown up with plenty. The womb, it seems, remembers. Even stranger in mice studies. Scientists trained rodents to fear the smell of cherry blossoms by pairing it with a mild electric shock. Within a few generations, pups who had never been shocked still panicked at the scent, a fear inherited, not learned. Now close your eyes for a moment. What smells make your body flinch? What rooms make your breath shorten? What lullabies make your chest ache even if you've never heard them before? Perhaps this is not just your life echoing backward. Perhaps it's your ancestors echoing forward. In some African cultures, the belief is clear. You are never alone. You walk with the 1,000 souls behind your eyes. It's poetic, yes. But now, science agrees in its own quiet way. Trauma, it turns out, is sticky. It clings not just to memories, but to blood chemistry, to hormone levels, to how tightly we hold our breath during conflict. or how quickly our heart races when someone leaves the room. Some researchers now suspect that inherited trauma may help explain disproportionate rates of mental illness in communities shaped by colonization, slavery, genocide, displacement. The ghosts live not just in stories but in synapses. But here's something even more quietly beautiful. We don't just inherit fear. We may also inherit resilience. Some children of war survivors show enhanced vigilance, not anxiety, but an intuitive radar. A gift passed down from those who survived the unspeakable. As if evolution, in its tenderness, gave them extra light in the dark. Others inherit gestures. A way of slicing fruit. A prayer whispered at the doorframe. A lullaby melody hummed without knowing its words. These are the memories that never had a name. They just arrived. In South Africa, some researchers turned to descendants of apartheid survivors, young adults raised far from the passbooks and checkpoints of that brutal regime. Many had never spoken about it with their parents. Yet still, in moments of pressure or injustice, their stress responses surged unnaturally high. Their bodies were on alert for battles they had never fought. In Japan, silence after Hiroshima became its own inheritance. Children born in the shadow of the bomb carried anxiety they could not name, as if they'd inhaled the grief left behind in the soil. These findings are echoed in Native American communities, where generational trauma from displacement, boarding schools, and cultural erasure shows up in health patterns, emotional expression, and even in birth outcomes. It is not just memory that survives, it is emotion coded into the nervous system. The body does not forget what history tries to erase. But epigenetics also speaks to something else: repair. Because if trauma can be written into the body, then healing can be, too. Studies show that supportive relationships, meaningful rituals, even storytelling, can begin to reverse the chemical tags of stress. Meditation changes methylation. Laughter affects cortisol. Gentle touch rewires what violence once burned. You are not a prisoner of your inheritance. You are the bridge. There's a phrase in many African cultures, Ubuntu I am, because we are. This isn't just philosophy. It's science written in kinship. Your nervous system was shaped in the arms of those who held your ancestors. Every kindness your lineage received or was denied echoes through you now. A study in the Netherlands examined children of Holocaust survivors and found altered cortisol profiles, similar to those exposed to chronic stress, even though these children were born after the war. The body, in some mysterious act of loyalty, keeps the score not just for you, but for those who came before. And yet something astonishing happens when those stories are finally named. When someone like you sits in quiet and wonders aloud, who did I come from? What grief wasn't spoken? What joy survived despite everything? Naming is healing. In many indigenous cultures, healing doesn't begin with medicine. It begins with story. A grandmother sings of the flood. A father weeps for a father he never knew. A child places flowers on a grave with no name. The ritual doesn't change the past, but it releases the present. It lets the ghosts rest, and it lets you sleep. Tonight, perhaps the reason your body softens as you listen is because you are not listening alone. Some part of you that lived long before you is hearing itself be remembered. And in that remembering, there is peace. So breathe. Not just for you, but for the ones who never had time to exhale. Breathe for the generations folded inside you. the ones who long to feel safe enough to dream. Because now, finally, they can. Now, let's go deeper. Section 7. Déjà vu and the illusion of the now. A glitch in the timing of the brain or a memory from a dream you never had. It happens in an instant. You walk into a room you've never seen before, and suddenly your heart slows, your breath catches, and something inside whispers, "You've been here before." The wallpaper feels familiar. The hum of the lights seems scripted. Even the sound of your footsteps echoes like a rehearsal. This moment, uncanny, fleeting, and oddly sacred, is called déjà vu, a French phrase meaning already seen. It describes the eerie experience of sensing that a current event has already occurred in the past. But what is it? Really? A spiritual glitch? A neurological hiccup? Or something deeper? A clue that memory and identity may not be anchored to the linear flow of time at all. Let's begin with the science. In the field of cognitive neuroscience, déjà vu is often considered a timing mismatch in the brain's memory system. According to research published in Frontiers in Psychology, déjà vu may result from a misfiring between two parts of the medial temporal lobe, the hippocampus, which encodes new memories, and the rhinal cortex, which processes familiarity. When the brain's circuits mistakenly fire in a pattern resembling a memory without actual memory encoding, the sensation of familiarity is triggered. Frontiers in Psychology, 2016. But here's where it gets even more mind-bending. In 2016, Dr. Akira O'Connor and his team at the University of St. Andrews used fMRI scans to study déjà vu episodes. They found that during the experience, the frontal regions of the brain, especially those linked to decision-making and conflict resolution, light up. This suggests that déjà vu may not be about memory at all. It could be your brain checking its memory system, running a kind of internal audit. Yet this scientific explanation doesn't fully capture the mystical texture of déjà vu. Why does it feel so emotionally charged, so intimately familiar, like a whisper from a forgotten dream? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst and father of analytical psychology, offered a radically different theory. He believed that déjà vu might arise from the activation of the collective unconscious, a deep, inherited memory structure shared across all of humanity. For Jung, these flashes of familiarity weren't glitches. They were echoes, symbols, archetypes re-emerging from the ancient, shared memory beneath individual identity. Jung, The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, 1959. You might be feeling both skeptical and fascinated, and that's the perfect place to be. Let's look at another dimension: the role of dreams. Some researchers suggest that déjà vu may be linked to dreams you've forgotten. This theory, called cryptomnesia, proposes that the brain stores dream content without proper labeling. So, when you experience a similar scene in waking life, it triggers an unconscious sense of familiarity. It's like walking into a dream you didn't know you had. There's a subtle poetry in this. What if the strange familiarity of déjà vu is less about science and more about symbolism? A moment when your inner and outer worlds briefly align like two mirrors reflecting each other. A glitch in time, yes, but also a glimpse of something timeless. Déjà vu may also have something to say about identity. In a world that constantly tells you who you are through culture, language, routine, déjà vu invites a pause, a disruption. It suggests that you are not entirely contained by the present moment, that your sense of self may stretch beyond the boundaries of space and time. Consider how déjà vu often feels like returning to a version of yourself that once was, or could have been. It's as though the mind is looping through parallel timelines, trying to find where you truly belong. And in that flicker, identity becomes not a single thread, but a web of simultaneous possibilities. This idea echoes recent explorations in quantum cognition, a theoretical model where the brain doesn't make decisions in a binary, linear way, but operates in probabilistic superpositions similar to quantum particles. Though still controversial and metaphorical in nature, this research opens up fascinating conversations about the multiplicity of consciousness. See Wang et al., Journal of Mathematical Psychology, 2014. Even spiritual traditions have long grappled with the mystery of déjà vu. In certain schools of Hinduism and Buddhism, déjà vu is seen as evidence of samskara residual impressions from past lives. A familiar street corner or a stranger's face may stir dormant memories encoded not in neurons, but in the soul. These interpretations do not contradict neuroscience, they complement it. Both point to the same truth: your experience of time, memory, and identity is far more fluid than it seems. As we drift back from this little rupture in time, consider this. Maybe déjà vu is the mind's way of reminding you that not all knowledge is conscious, that your life is shaped not just by what you remember, but by what remembers you. Section 8. Split Selves, the you that watches you. You may not always notice it, but something inside you is always watching, not watching the world, watching you. The way your thoughts rise and fall, the way your emotions come and go like waves on a windless lake. Sometimes, when you catch yourself in a moment of silence, maybe in the middle of brushing your teeth, or right before sleep, there's a strange sensation. Who is thinking these thoughts? And deeper still, who is noticing them? This quiet observer isn't loud. It doesn't have a name or a face, but it has always been with you. The one who knows you're angry even when you're pretending not to be. The one who sees the inner monologue spiraling, even while it spins out. That silent gaze, the one behind the thoughts, is what some traditions call the observing self. In psychology, this notion appears in dual process theory, developed by Daniel Kahneman and others. It describes two systems of thought. System 1, fast and automatic, your gut reaction, your reflexes, your emotional habits. And System 2, slow and reflective, the one who steps back, notices, questions. When you pause before reacting in anger, when you recognize a bias, when you choose stillness over reaction, that's the observer emerging. But psychology is just one lens. Across the world, this watcher has many names. In Buddhism, it's the citta, or pure awareness, not a self in the egoic sense, but a witnessing consciousness. In certain branches of Hindu philosophy, it's the Atman, the eternal soul. In mindfulness teachings, it's simply awareness without judgment. This observing self is not bound by the chattering mind. In fact, it's the only part of you that isn't. You can think about thinking, feel sorrow about your joy, reflect on your own reflection. It's as if there are layers of you stacked like quiet mirrors, each one watching the next. And perhaps the deepest paradox: the more you notice this observer, the more you realize you're not the thoughts, you're not the feelings, you're the one witnessing them pass. This idea may sound abstract, but it's felt deeply in daily life. Think about those moments when you're caught in a loop, maybe rehearsing an argument in your head, or obsessing over something you said last week. Suddenly, there's a flicker of awareness. Why am I doing this? That flicker is the watcher waking up, or perhaps you've experienced it during meditation, or while watching a sunset, or hearing a song that takes your breath away. The self dissolves for a moment, and all that remains is presence, silent, vast, watching. But where does this self come from? Some neuroscientists argue that it's a function of the default mode network DMN, the brain system active when we are not focused on the outside world. This network is linked to introspection, self-reflection, and the mental time travel of imagining past and future. Yet in meditation, the DMN quiets, and paradoxically, people report more awareness, not less. It's as though silence unveils the observer beneath. In his book Thinking, Fast and Slow, Kahneman describes how System 2 is lazy. It doesn't always step in. Most of the time, we run on autopilot. But with effort or trauma, or meditation, or awe, we can activate that inner witness. And once seen, it's hard to unsee. Mystics have long spoken of this self as a kind of sacred ghost. Rumi, the 13th century Sufi poet, called it the guest within. He wrote, "You wander from room to room, hunting for the diamond necklace that is already around your neck." Psychologists like Viktor Frankl found it in suffering. In the Nazi concentration camps, he noticed that even when everything was taken from a person, their name, their dignity, their family there, remained one freedom to choose how they responded. That power of choice, he believed, was the spark of the observer. Let's take this even deeper into the quiet landscapes of trauma and healing. In many therapeutic approaches to complex trauma, the sense of an observing self is often one of the first things to fracture. Survivors of prolonged emotional or psychological harm may find that their internal world splits into voices, reactions, and self-narratives that don't feel like them. This isn't just metaphorical. Studies on dissociative identity disorder show that the brain physically compartmentalizes these states, as if protecting the true self by hiding it in layers of silence. Yet, paradoxically, it is often the rediscovery of the witness that begins the process of healing. Practices like internal family systems, IFS, pioneered by Richard Schwartz, teach individuals to return to the self, a core essence characterized by calm, curiosity, compassion, and clarity. This self watches without judgment. It welcomes even the most painful parts: the angry child, the ashamed protector, not as problems to fix, but as lost members of the inner family. The witness becomes a healer, not by doing, but by seeing. This aligns eerily with what mystics and monks have whispered for centuries: that salvation isn't found by escaping the self, but by observing it so deeply that it loses its hold on you. The watcher is not passive, it is transformative. And here's something to hold gently when you lie awake at night. Thoughts whispering past your mind like fading echoes. Notice the one who hears them. The silent witness, not judging, not thinking, just there. That is you. The you beneath every thought, every fear, every hope. You are not the storm. You are the sky it passes through. Section 9. You can be two people at once. Split brain experiments showed us the self can fracture and still function. Close your eyes and imagine holding an apple in your left hand. Now picture someone asking what you're holding, but your mouth cannot answer. Not because you're unwilling, but because the part of your brain that knows the answer is no longer connected to the part that speaks. This isn't fiction. It's the strange world revealed by the landmark split brain experiments of the 20th century. Roger Sperry and Michael Gazzaniga, pioneers in neuropsychology, conducted studies on patients whose corpus callosum, the thick bundle of nerves connecting the brain's two hemispheres, had been surgically severed to alleviate severe epilepsy. What they discovered fundamentally changed how we think about the self. Before these experiments, we imagined the self as unified, a single voice, a central narrator. But in the lab, something strange occurred. When researchers flashed an image to the patient's left visual field processed by the right hemisphere, the patient could not verbally name it, because speech is controlled by the left hemisphere. Yet the patient could draw the object with the left hand, which is also controlled by the right hemisphere. The knowledge was there, but the access was divided. It was as if two separate selves were living under one skull. One of Gazzaniga's patients was shown a snowy scene with the left visual field and a chicken claw with the right. When asked to point to related images, the left-hand right brain chose a shovel appropriate for the snow. The right-hand left brain picked a chicken matching the claw. When asked to explain both choices, the speaking left hemisphere confidently said, "Oh, the chicken claw goes with the chicken, and you need a shovel to clean out the chicken coop." No awareness of the real snow scene. Just a seamless rationalization. This phenomenon, known as confabulation, is not just a quirk, it's a clue. The speaking hemisphere, even when lacking information, invents coherent stories to preserve a sense of unity. In a way, we're always stitching together a self out of fragments. And here's the eerie part in these patients. Neither side seemed disturbed. The split selves functioned, adapted, even developed preferences. One hand might unbutton a shirt while the other buttons it up. One hemisphere laughs while the other remains silent. Consciousness, it seems, can split and still feel whole. Gazzaniga coined the term left brain interpreter to describe this narrative function. The left hemisphere, especially in Western right-handed individuals, is the chatterbox, the explainer, the justifier. But it doesn't always tell the truth. It tells a story that makes sense, not one that's necessarily accurate. This finding echoes deeper questions from philosophy and Buddhism. Is there truly one self, or just a collection of processes, a flowing river with many eddies, as the Buddha once described? In the Pali Canon, the idea of anatta non-self points to this exact conclusion. The self is a useful illusion, composed of aggregates, none of which are permanent. Split brain research also complicates how we think about free will. If two hemispheres can disagree and act independently, which one chooses? If a person simultaneously wants to grab and release an object, which desire is you? Modern neuroscience builds on this. In normal, intact brains, hemispheric specialization still exists. We often switch between analytic and emotional modes, between logical narration and wordless intuition. Your selves might not be surgically split, but they still compete for dominance. And you, the watcher behind it all, rarely notice. Some patients report feeling like two people. In cases of dissociative identity disorder or severe trauma, these divisions become even starker. But the split brain experiments suggest that multiplicity is not always pathology. It might be our default. One researcher, V.S. Ramachandran, speculated that split-brain patients are like two people sharing one body. But perhaps we're all like that, to a lesser degree. Different moods, contexts, and memories activate different selves: the work self, the child self, the dreaming self. You might even feel it right now, part of you engaged in this thought, another part drifting elsewhere. So what holds it all together? Some propose memory, the continuity of experience. Others say it's language, or the illusion of time. But perhaps it's the brain's desire to narrate, to say, "This is me," even when that me is many. So next time you talk to yourself, really talk. Consider this. Maybe it's not just a monologue. Maybe it's a conversation between selves. And maybe both are listening. Section 10. Your brain forgets more than it remembers on purpose. Forgetting is an act of mercy, a gift of space. You walk through a garden of memories, thinking you've planted each flower with care. But what you don't see, what your brain doesn't let you see, is the vast compost heap just beyond the path. It's where most memories go. Not by accident, not by failure, but by design. Your brain is a forgetting machine. Not because it's faulty, but because forgetting is survival. We tend to worship memory. Museums, diaries, cloud backups, heirlooms, all crafted in reverence to recall. But evolution had a different priority. It built us to prune, to shed, to discard what no longer serves. And science is only now beginning to understand why forgetting is not a bug, but a crucial feature. Let's start with the hippocampus, that seahorse-shaped structure buried deep within your brain. It's often praised as the memory center, but recent studies suggest it's also a memory sculptor, constantly whittling down, simplifying, and even erasing. In fact, intentional forgetting is one of its most vital jobs. A 2022 meta-analysis published in Nature Reviews Neuroscience detailed how memory pruning during sleep is essential to cognitive health. This pruning, mediated by slow-wave sleep and REM cycles, clears away excess synaptic connections that were formed during the day. Like gardeners trimming branches so the tree can grow stronger, the brain deletes to renew. Without this process, the neural network would become saturated, unable to form new memories, cluttered with obsolete noise. This is called synaptic homeostasis. Imagine if every face you passed on the street, every leaf on every tree, every forgotten password stayed inside your mind with equal emotional weight. You'd drown in details. You wouldn't be able to prioritize, to feel, to grow. Memory is not a storage unit. It's a living, breathing thing. And forgetting is how it stays alive. Psychologist Blake Richards of the University of Toronto, co-author of a pivotal neuron study, proposed a radical idea: forgetting enhances intelligence. His research suggests that memory isn't about preserving truth, but optimizing behavior. If a memory no longer aligns with the present environment, it's better to lose it than let it misguide you. So what kind of memories are forgotten first? Mostly trivial facts, outdated associations, emotional overloads. But even traumatic memories can be suppressed through a process called memory reconsolidation, where recall opens the door to rewriting. That's why therapy doesn't just dredge up pain, it reshapes it. And the hippocampus, again, is the gatekeeper. But not all forgetting is gentle. Sometimes, it's abrupt and protective. In people with PTSD, the brain often walls off memories entirely. Neurobiologist Rachel Yehuda's work has shown that this suppression is a neurochemical shield, an act of mercy by an overwhelmed system. And then there's motivated forgetting, the conscious act of letting go. Have you ever tried to unremember someone's face or to forget a thing you wish you never saw? It's nearly impossible. But still, with repetition, sleep, and time, the edges blur. What was once vivid becomes grainy. And then nothing. Even the famed forgetting curve discovered by psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus in the 1880s still holds true. Within an hour, most of what we learn disappears. Within a day, even more vanishes. Unless reinforced, the brain lets it fade. And this isn't laziness. It's efficiency. Yet, here's the paradox: we remember that we forget. We carry ghosts' feelings that something once mattered, even if we can't name it. A smell that haunts us. A face that flickers like a candle in wind. The memory itself may be gone, but its echo lingers. And sometimes forgetting is beautiful. A mother who forgets the pain of childbirth. A lover who forgets a cruel word. A nation that forgets war, not out of denial, but because it chooses peace. Forgetting isn't failure. It's a sacred gesture, a way to make room for tomorrow. You are not your collection of memories. You are what you remember to carry and what you are wise enough to let go. Section 11. Dreams are memory's sandbox. Your dreams rearrange yesterday to prepare you for tomorrow. You sleep, and the story begins, but not the one you think. This is not a story made of logic or reason. It is stitched from fragments: a glance across a train platform, the unfinished sentence from a friend, the feeling you forgot to feel. While you lie still, your brain wanders into a realm beyond time. And there, in that luminous dark, your memories are not just stored, they are transformed. Dreams are not escapism, they are architecture. And the architect is you. During REM sleep, the rapid eye movement phase that arrives like waves in the later hours of night, your brain becomes more active than it was during the day. But this activity isn't random noise. It is the careful reweaving of your life. Matthew Walker, the neuroscientist and sleep expert at UC Berkeley, describes REM sleep as overnight therapy, a sacred chamber where emotions are stripped from memories, leaving behind the lesson, but not the pain. A breakup, a humiliation, a fear. They arrive again in dream form, but softened, distorted, defanged. This is not malfunction, it is survival. Studies show that dreaming helps consolidate emotional and procedural memory. The dreams may seem bizarre: riding a bicycle made of birds, speaking with a version of your grandmother who looks like a lighthouse, but behind the chaos is deep coherence. You are rehearsing future challenges. You are learning what to let go of. You are integrating truths that daytime logic cannot touch. The Sleep Foundation explains it like this. REM sleep plays a crucial role in pattern recognition and emotional memory regulation, while non-REM sleep strengthens facts, names, dates. It is REM that connects them, weaving a narrative arc through the fragments. Without it, your knowledge remains scattered. With it, your story begins to make sense. And that's the paradox: we don't dream to remember. We dream to forget and rebuild. Your brain plays in a sandbox, sculpting, demolishing, reconfiguring. Every night, you revisit your experiences with a new brush, adding surreal color, rearranging sequences. That moment you said the wrong thing, that stranger's eyes, that sound you heard in the rain. It all returns, but not for nostalgia, for evolution. This is how creative breakthroughs are born. Artists, inventors, mystics, they all speak of dream-born insight. Kekule's dream of a serpent gave us the benzene ring. Mary Shelley's nightmare gave birth to Frankenstein. Paul McCartney awoke with yesterday in his head. Dreams are not just memory consolidation, they are imagination unchained. And in your own life, subtle shifts happen. You wake up and somehow, you understand someone better. You feel less afraid. You notice the solution was always there. Because your dreaming mind rearranged the chessboard while your waking self lay still. It's not always graceful. Sometimes the dream is messy, disjointed, strange. But even that is sacred. Because dreaming gives you emotional distance from wounds that feel too raw. It turns sharp moments into soft metaphors. And metaphors heal. So next time you dream something that makes no sense, remember this. Your subconscious is rearranging your world. You are sculpting memory with the hands of sleep. It may look like nonsense, but it is your mind practicing love, practicing grief, practicing being human. You are not just remembering. You are rehearsing who you are about to become. Section 12. If you erased all memory, are you still? You amnesia patients force us to ask, is identity deeper than memory? Imagine waking up, and the mirror doesn't blink back with recognition. Your name is a sound someone else gave you. The room is unfamiliar. The voice calling from the hallway feels kind, but you don't know why. You sense something familiar textures. A scent that almost unlocks something but nothing connects. You've become a present tense without a past. This is not a science fiction riddle. It is the waking reality of those who live with profound amnesia. And through them, we are forced to ask, if all your memories vanished, would anything of you remain? You may remember Oliver Sacks, the neurologist poet. In his quiet writings, he introduced the world to lives unmoored from memory. One patient, Jimmy G, believed it was 1945 every day. He looked in the mirror and recoiled from his aged reflection. And yet, Sacks saw something else despite his loss of time and memory. Jimmy laughed. He cried at music. He made kind jokes with nurses. There was still someone there. So who was that? In the more famous case, Henry Molaison, known as H.M., underwent surgery in the 1950s to relieve his seizures. Surgeons removed parts of his hippocampus, not yet fully understanding its role. The result, H.M., became a man trapped in a 30-second loop. Every moment, new again. Every greeting, a first. He could not form new memories and retained almost none from before. And yet he could still learn. His hands remembered how to draw patterns in a mirror. His body knew what his mind could not grasp. So we ask again, if memory fades, are you gone? Perhaps not. Perhaps identity lives deeper than recollection. Perhaps you are not your memories, but your manner of response. How you gaze at the moon. How you flinch at cruelty. How you love, even if you forget why. H. still laughed. He still became embarrassed. He still enjoyed puzzles. He didn't remember his mother had died. But he cried every time he was told. Somewhere, the soul knew. It's strange, isn't it? We often say, I am who I am because of what I've lived. But what if the essence of you, the you behind your name, your school, your address is not a scrapbook of experiences, but a flame, a presence that responds, even when it no longer recalls? When you sleep, you enter a miniature version of this forgetting. Most dreams vanish. Most days blur. And yet, some quiet thread remains constant. You return to yourself each morning not because you remember, but because you are still becoming. So maybe memory is the soil, but identity is the tree. And even if the storm uproots your timeline, some invisible root may hold. You are not gone. You are just changing the shape of how you exist. Section 13. The myth of a single self. You are a symphony, not a solo, and the instruments change daily. Close your eyes for a moment and feel the quiet crowd within you. There's the version of you that smiles politely at strangers, another that sighs deeply when no one is looking. One speaks with certainty, another hides behind gentle hesitation. Sometimes they take turns. Sometimes they speak all at once. And yet, we pretend there's only one name at the front of this orchestra. Only one I, one conductor, one mask. But you've never truly been one. You are a shifting chorus, a constellation of selves that rise and fall with the moon. The Buddhists call it anatta, the doctrine of non-self. Not because you are empty, but because the self is a mist. It clings to no form. It changes shape moment by moment. There is no permanent you behind the curtain. Only the theater of sensations, thoughts, impulses, fears. Carl Jung offered a similar whisper. We are all made of personas, masks, roles we wear for survival, for love, for approval. The child, the rebel, the shadow, the healer, they all live inside you. Not as fakes, but as fragments of a greater truth. A kaleidoscope spinning through your lifetime. And modern multiplicity psychology agrees. It doesn't call you broken for having parts. It simply says you are many, and that is okay. Sometimes your inner parts argue. Sometimes they support one another. Sometimes they retreat into sleep, only to awaken when the right memory calls. Tonight, the tired self may be resting, but another, the poetic one, or the philosopher, or the dreamer is listening now. You may not realize it, but you already shift identities a dozen times a day. The you who speaks to your parents is not the you who walks alone in a forest. The you who writes in the dark is not the you who answers emails or shops for groceries. And none of them are lying. They are simply parts of your great and gentle mosaic. So, if you've ever wondered why you sometimes feel like a stranger to yourself, or why your voice can sound unfamiliar in moments of change, you're not broken. You're vast. A self is not a statue. It is a flock, a wind dance, a memory playing out in many keys. The more gently you listen to each voice inside you, the more peace you may find. Not in becoming one, but in becoming whole. Section 14. The brain creates false memories. Constantly. Sometimes, your most vivid memory is fiction. You close your eyes and remember it perfectly. The smell of a room, the sound of her voice, the way sunlight fell on the table. It's there. Vivid. Rich. Untouched by time. But what if it never happened? The brain is a marvelous storyteller, but not always an honest one. It does not record your life like a camera. It paints it in brush strokes of bias, emotion, suggestion, and sleep. Elizabeth Loftus, a pioneer in memory research, showed us this delicate truth. In study after study, she planted events into people's minds, memories of things that never occurred. A hot air balloon ride, a shopping mall panic, a childhood pet that never lived. And people remembered. They described details, emotions, colors. Not because they were lying, but because the mind had woven fiction into feeling. This is the misinformation effect, the brain's quiet tendency to revise its past based on subtle cues. A word, a question, a photograph. Like a dream that feels true simply because you woke up with it still glowing in your chest. Even your most sacred memories, first love, loss, triumph, are not stored in glass cases. They are edited each time you recall them. Each retelling, rewrites. Like water over stone, neuroscientists have found that recalling a memory opens it up to change. The hippocampus and amygdala, those old guardians of memory and emotion, unlock the file. And while it's open, your feelings now, your mood, your surroundings, the words of others might color it. Then the brain files it away again, subtly altered. But you won't know. You'll call it truth. You'll say, I remember it exactly. But memory is not exact. It's emotional. It's living. So when you cling to something with certainty, this is how it happened. I was there. I know. Pause. Let the air between certainty and mystery soften, because the brain is not betraying you. It's protecting you, creating meaning, telling stories to make sense of everything you've survived. The past, then, is a tapestry always being rewoven. And that means you are never stuck in it. Tonight, as you drift into dreams, the threads of your day will loosen. Some will fade. Some will reshape. Some may never return. And that's not a loss. It's mercy. Memory isn't there to trap you. It's there to carry you gently, imperfectly into the next version of you. Section 15. Time loops in memory. Why the past repeats in dreams. Dreams echo unsolved memories until they are felt, not just remembered. Sometimes, when the world has gone quiet and your head meets the pillow, you return to the hallway you haven't walked in 20 years, to a face long gone, to the same strange moment. Again and again, a loop you can't quite escape. Not memory, not fiction, just a shadow. Replaying. Why do certain memories repeat in dreams not once, but many times? Why does your sleeping mind reassemble the past with such delicate urgency? The answer lies in a truth that science, psychology, and mysticism all seem to whisper. The past does not leave until it is felt. Neuroscientists have studied this looping phenomenon. During REM sleep, when your brain is most electrically alive, the hippocampus and amygdala become highly active. These regions replay recent emotional experiences and encode them, blending them with older, unresolved memories. But here's the mystery. It's not just what happened that matters. It's how deeply you experienced it. Dreams are not about facts. They are about feeling. And the brain, during sleep, knows when something was left unfelt. Trauma psychologists say that unprocessed emotions often loop back disguised, distorted, vivid, because the body and brain remember what the conscious mind tried to forget. Like a note that wasn't resolved at the end of a song. So it repeats. Quietly. Insistently. You might dream of being chased, of falling, of searching. Not because you're broken, but because your inner self is trying to close a circle. The Sufis, those mystical poets of Islam, described memory as a circle in motion. They said what you do not embrace will return again, in different form, until you do. Even your dreams are teachers, cloaked in strange metaphors. They offer you the chance to feel what you refuse to face while awake. So the classroom reappears. The voice of a friend long gone. The decision you didn't make. Sometimes, it's not trauma at all, but wonder. Your mind returning to the scent of your grandmother's tea. The softness of a night in summer. A fragment of music from your childhood. Memory. Looping not to hurt, but to remind. To bless, because repetition is not always a prison. Sometimes, it's devotion. And when the past replays itself, perhaps your brain is not malfunctioning. Perhaps it is kneeling beside your heart, saying, "Here. This part of you still matters. Each night, you dream. Most dreams you forget. But the ones that return, those are letters from the part of you that still wants to heal." Science Daily reports that the dreaming brain often prioritizes emotionally unresolved material. It presents it in visual metaphors because symbolism softens the blow. Instead of reliving the pain, you see a door that won't open, a train you miss, a face that never speaks. And sometimes, just sometimes, if you feel it fully, the loop lets go. And the next night, that dream does not return. So tonight, when you drift into the spiral of sleep, do not be afraid of repetition. It is not a glitch. It is grace. Let the loops play out. Let the past reappear. Touch it. Listen. Feel. Because in sleep, your soul returns to the unfinished pages. Not to rewrite them, but to finally turn the page. Section 16. When the brain invents people that never existed, phantom friends, invisible critics, and memories stage actors, there are people in your mind who were never born. You remember their voices, their laughter. You remember the way they made you feel safe, judged, seen, or broken. But when you try to place them in time, in space, they dissolve like fog. Your memory, it turns out, is not a journal. It's a theater. And sometimes, the actors on its stage were never in the audience of your life. They are illusions made of longing, fear, or pure imagination. And yet, they feel so real. Have you ever woken from a dream with the ache of someone you loved but could not name? Have you ever carried the scolding voice of a critic who never existed outside your thoughts? These are the ghosts of the invented. In neuroscience, there are names for some of these illusions. Capgras delusion, the belief that someone close to you has been replaced by an imposter. Fragoli delusion, the sense that many people are secretly the same person in disguise. They sound extreme, but they reveal something universal. The mind fills in blanks to make the story complete, even if the details are fabricated. You see, your brain is a master of narrative. It does not always care about truth. It cares about continuity. So if there was an emotional hole and absence where love, or safety, or blame should have been, your mind might fill it with a phantom. A childhood friend you now realize had no name. A teacher you remember vividly, but no one else does. A stranger in a recurring dream who somehow always knows you. These creations are not mistakes. They are stitches. Emotional placeholders, the brain's way of keeping the self coherent in a world that often wasn't. Even in adulthood, imaginary companions can arise. Not dolls or dragons like in childhood, but inner voices, critical observers, invented mentors, symbolic lovers. Psychologists call them introjects, internalized personas, built from fragments of real people, stories, and imagination, sometimes helpful, sometimes harmful. Have you ever argued with someone who wasn't there? Felt judged by someone whose face you can't recall? That's the mind's ensemble cast whispering through the backstage curtains of your thoughts. And in dreams, these characters multiply. You meet a man who feels like your brother, a woman who seems to have known you forever. They weep, or laugh, or vanish. You wake, aching only to realize they were never real. But what is real? If a memory shaped you, does it matter whether the person it belonged to was real? There's something beautiful in the idea that your brain can love something it imagined, can grieve for a figure stitched together from shadows, that even fiction leaves fingerprints. In Tibetan dream yoga, they say all beings in dreams are you, and you are all beings. Your mind is not just remembering life, it's composing it. So tonight, if someone visits your dream, someone kind, or cruel, or utterly unknown, don't be afraid. They might be a memory that never happened, or a truth your waking mind isn't ready to hear. Let them speak. Let them vanish. You do not have to know where they came from to honor how they made you feel. After all, the heart doesn't ask if love was real. It only knows that it was felt. And sometimes, the most important parts of us were shaped by people who never even lived. Section 17. The identity that forms in solitude. Who you are when no one is watching may be truest or illusion. When the room is still, and no one is asking, watching, answering, a strange figure steps forward. It is you. But not the version others know. Not the performer. The pleaser. The processor. This is the self that floats in the hush of solitude. Unnamed. Untamed. Sometimes unbearable. You close the door. The world vanishes. And you begin to speak silently, not to anyone, not even to yourself, but as yourself. Who are you in that silence? Jean-Paul Sartre once suggested that when we are alone, we are free from the gaze of the other. And in that freedom, we might discover something pure or something terrifying, because the gaze gives shape, and without it, identity dissolves like mist. Are you more real without witnesses or less? In solitude, your habits loosen. You wear clothes differently. You move differently. You think strange, looping thoughts that would never be said aloud. You hum without melody. You taste your breath. This version of you is not filtered by approval or resistance. It is private, but also unknowable. Virginia Woolf called solitude the still house of the soul. She believed that the deeper currents of creativity and clarity only begin to stir when we are left alone long enough to hear them. But there's danger, too. The same solitude that heals can also distort. The echo chamber of your own mind can replay self-doubt until it becomes doctrine. You may think you're discovering your essence, but perhaps you're just refining a story you told yourself long ago. It's strange you can live an entire life beside yourself without ever knowing who you are in the absence of others. You might discover, alone in the dark, that you're braver than the world let you be, or softer, or more bitter, or funnier, or simply quieter. Sometimes in solitude, you speak aloud not for anyone to hear, but because your voice wants to remember it exists. The syllables carry no audience, no applause, only echo. And even that is enough. In psychological studies of solitude, researchers found that brief aloneness increases self-awareness. But prolonged isolation can blur the boundaries between who we are and who we fear we are. You are both actor and audience now. And the mirrors in this house are made of memory. A moment alone can feel like relief. But an hour, a day, a life. The solitude deepens, and something ancient returns. You may begin to feel that time is suspended, that clocks are pretending, that thoughts are not yours exactly. They're just visitors, dressed in your skin. You walk through rooms like a ghost of yourself. Not lonely, not quite, but translucent. Yet in this translucence, you begin to see more clearly. You see the shape of your longing, the scent of your childhood, the rhythm of your unspoken fears. You see the self that watches even when no one else does. And sometimes, that watcher is enough, because maybe the truest version of you isn't the one you show others. Maybe it's the one that dances in an empty kitchen at 3 a.m., with socks on and no music playing. Or the one that cries alone for reasons too tangled to name. Or the one that stands by the window, just watching the moon breathe. And maybe, just maybe, you don't need to know whether that self is real or imagined. Maybe it's enough that it exists at all. Section 18. Why ancient cultures believed memory was sacred. From Egyptian soul tests to Vedic thought, memory was a portal. You close your eyes, and inside the dark folds of your mind, something opens. Not a thought. Not quite. Something older than words. A feeling you've remembered before you even lived it. In ancient times, this sensation would not be dismissed. It would be revered. Memory, in many old worlds, was not stored in the brain. It was stored in the soul. To the Egyptians, memory was the record that followed you after death. When you stood before the gods in the Hall of Two Truths, your heart was weighed not against sins, but against Ma'at, the cosmic balance. Your memories were part of that weight. They were evidence of harmony or chaos. If your heart was light, if your memories were true, you passed through the gates of eternity. But if you had forgotten sacred obligations, if memory had been twisted, abandoned, silenced, then the beast Amit would consume your soul, and you would dissolve into non-being, not punished, just forgotten. In the Rig Veda and the Upanishads, memory wasn't just personal. It was a cosmic echo. The Sanskrit term smriti, meaning that which is remembered, was tied to divine knowledge, a sacred kind of recall that linked human life to an eternal, vibrating order. To forget, in this world, was not a failure of the mind. It was a rift in the thread of Dharma, a crack in the soul's continuity. Memory was how you returned to yourself across lifetimes, across veils. And the Sumerians, they did not write stories merely for entertainment. They etched memories into clay rituals, hymns, the deeds of kings, the positions of stars when love was made or blood was spilled. In Sumerian temples, a priest's role was not just to perform, but to remember, to carry the lineage of gods and men, to preserve the chant exactly, syllable by sacred syllable. Because to misremember a ritual was to offend the cosmos. And still today, somewhere deep in you, you sense the weight of forgetting. You know how it aches when a face fades, or a name slips through your fingers like water you were once meant to hold. You know the quiet panic when a childhood moment returns, but you can no longer tell if it really happened. You only feel it, smell it, grieve it. And perhaps that grief is sacred too. In sleep, when memories rearrange themselves, your mind becomes a temple. Dreams file the sensations. Your brain tags emotion to images. so that years later, a smell in the wind might resurrect a scene your conscious mind never stored. And when you sit alone, hearing a song that you didn't know you'd forgotten, somewhere sacred your ancient self stirs. Because memory, for those who came before us, was never simply an archive. It was a bridge, a conversation between the soul and the stars, between what was lived and what was meant. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, a passage reads, "I have remembered the secret names, and I shall not be lost." You whisper those words now, not knowing where you heard them, or if they came from you at all. But tonight, as you drift into sleep, you hold them close like a spell. To remember is to continue. To forget is to vanish. And perhaps your dreams tonight are not just illusions. Perhaps they are memories you were always meant to retrieve. Section 19. Memory is not inside you. It's between you and the world. Objects, rooms, smells. They hold yourself like mirrors. There's a book on your shelf. Its pages are yellowed, its spine cracked. You haven't opened it in years. But when your eyes land on it, a memory stirs. Not from the story inside, but from the time you were reading it. The weather, the person who was sitting near you, the song playing faintly in another room. And just like that, you're there again. Not in your mind, in the world. It might surprise you to know many philosophers and cognitive scientists now believe that memory doesn't live inside your head. It lives between you and the world. According to Andy Clark and David Chalmers, in their now famous theory of the extended mind, your mind isn't limited to your brain. It stretches outward into your notebook, your phone, your surroundings, your rituals. They argue that memory is scaffolded. You lean on the external. A calendar is not just a tool, it's part of your mind. That photo tucked in your wallet. It's not just a keepsake. It's a retrieval cue, a neural pathway etched into an object, a mirror that shows you. And what happens when you walk into a childhood room or smell the perfume your grandmother used to wear? The world becomes the mind. You don't recall a memory. You stand inside it. Phenomenologists have long known this. Maurice Merleau-Ponty spoke of the lived body not as a container of consciousness, but as a meeting point, a breathing hinge between inner and outer, self and space. Your hand remembers how to unlock that old door. Your breath slows at the sound of that chime. The mind isn't just cognitive, it's spatial, emotional, embodied. Your memories aren't filed in a mental cabinet. They're smeared across landscapes, pooled in teacups, soaked into the way the morning light hits a certain wall. You are not a sealed jar of memories. You are a porous constellation connected by sensations and objects, by textures and placements, by time frozen into things. Even neuroscience plays along. Studies in embodied cognition show that when you recall a memory, your sensory and motor regions light up. Not just the hippocampus, but the fingers, the eyes, the spine. Your body reenacts memory, like a ritual, like a dance your cells remember. And so you keep certain objects not for their use, but for their echo. A sweater you never wear, a note you never reread, a chair with no function but presence. They hold your identity when you forget. They whisper, "You were here. You felt this. You loved tonight." Maybe you look around your room, and you realize it's not just where you sleep. It's where your memories hide. In corners, in shadows, in the weight of the blanket, in the sound of the fan, in the quiet resilience of your favorite mug. You are surrounded by your past, but not in a haunting way, in a holding way. The world carries you. You don't have to remember everything. Some things remember you. So close your eyes now. Softly. Let the room remember for you. Let the night hold your memories in its dark palm. Because maybe the mind is not inside the skull. Maybe it's a field, a fog, a network of quiet places where the soul and the world gently touch. Section 20. You were never just one. You are a collage of people, times, dreams, and unspoken things. There's a strange feeling that drifts in sometimes when you find an old photograph of yourself or reread something you once wrote. You recognize the name, the eyes, the shape of the thought. But something feels distant, like looking at a former life you didn't quite live. And maybe you didn't, because here's the quiet truth: you were never just one you. You've always been a shifting constellation, a mosaic made of moments. People who brushed against you, dreams that visited only once. Carl Jung called it the multiplicity of the self. That behind the quiet performance of I, there are voices, archetypes, shadows, masks, each waiting for the right light to step forward. The child who still lives in your laughter, the old soul who sighs before sleep, the protector, the romantic, the wanderer, the fool. You contain them all. Thomas Metzinger, in his philosophy of mind, said that the self is not a thing, but a process, a model, a simulation the brain constructs to make sense of being. There is no fixed you in the control room, just stories told in real time, patterns reacting to patterns, a gentle illusion designed to hold it all together. And Eastern spiritual texts have known this all along. In the Upanishads, in Zen, in Tibetan Dzogchen, the self is a flowing river. No beginning, no end, no owner, no center. You are not the thought. You are the space in which thought appears. So, when you look back and feel the strangeness of your past selves, that girl who stayed too quiet, that boy who was always running, that version of you who believed in forever or feared the sky would fall, they're not mistakes. They're layers. They still live inside you, not as prisoners, but as echoes. Ink in your voice, dust in your dreams. And what about the you that never happened? The one who stayed in that city. The one who said yes instead of no. The one who kissed back or walked away. They, too, are part of your constellation, not in body, but intention in the unchosen paths that still color your soul. You are not a single thread. You are a tapestry of almosts and always. And memory, that sacred glue, holds the seams in gentle defiance of time. You've borrowed pieces from everyone you've ever loved. A gesture from a parent, a phrase from a friend, a silence from a stranger. Some you picked up without noticing. Some you carved in on purpose. And some they simply arrived one night, in a dream you don't remember. So if you ever feel like you're changing too much, or not enough, remember this: change is not betrayal. It is your nature. To shift, to dissolve, to gather again. You are allowed to outgrow your name, to forget the things that once defined you, to wake up softer, stranger, more spacious than yesterday. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, feel them all: the younger you, the wiser you, the tired you who longs for rest, and the version of you still arriving from some faraway shore. Let them all curl beside you in the quiet. You are a home for many selves, and none of them are alone. And now, as the last echoes of thought begin to soften, as the strange riddles of reality fade into stillness, you find yourself not needing answers anymore. You've wandered through mirrors that reflected nothing, listened to clocks that bent in circles, and questioned the very self that dares to call itself you. But here, in the hush between questions, you discover something far gentler, a silence that does not demand to be solved. What if the final paradox is that peace does not come from knowing, but from letting go of knowing? You do not need to hold on anymore. Not to the thoughts, not to the images, not even to the names. Tonight, the universe does not need you to solve anything. It only asks that you rest, feel the weight of your limbs sink deeper, as if gravity itself is a lullaby. Let the breath come softer now. Each inhale a small permission to disappear for a while. The bed beneath you is no longer a surface. It is a vessel, a quiet ship carrying you into the waters of forgetting, of remembering in another way. What if this moment, this simple falling asleep, is the most sacred form of surrender? The mind, always so busy, has done enough for today. It has danced with mystery, and now it bows in stillness. Even if the world is a dream, even if you are made of stories and echoes, you are allowed to rest. Nothing more is asked of you now. Not clarity, not logic, not even identity. Only presence, only peace. And as the last words begin to vanish, like sand slipping through an open palm, know this: you are safe. You are loved. You are already home. The world can wait. Close your eyes now. Sweet dreams.